We still do. We run an organization, it's economic development called Waterfront Ventures. And the mission of our organizations was to bring tech startups into underserved communities to provide tech jobs and opportunities for students who can't transcend, students and families who have a difficult time transcending the income barrier. And so that was our work with Waterfront Ventures. Afterward, myself and my co-founder, we co-founded a company, a startup called Penji, with the goal of actually being one of the first startup to headquarter in Camden to provide those jobs and opportunities that we're preaching about. So that's our work.
Well, and how are the initiatives that you're rolling out in Camden? How do you think they apply nationally as far as creating that entrepreneurial ecosystem in a city?
That's a good question. What we're trying to do right now is work with both institutions and government to develop a startup ecosystem, one that's conducive and one that could actually be attractive for startups to come to our city, whether it's from Philly, from New York, from San Fran, because underserved communities, there is a population there, a talent pool that startups could utilize. And how do I say this? Right now, we're trying to work with the City of Camden and the institutions to build an accelerator. And hopefully the accelerator, in conjunction with a handful of other co-working spaces, could provide that ecosystem, at least the grassroots.
Kyrie, you work very closely with students. So tell us a little bit about Onyx Valley and that hands-on approach that you take working with students at universities.
Sure. So I started Onyx Valley because there's definitely a need for more diversity in the tech field. And you've heard a lot of companies point to a pipeline problem. So rather than just keep talking about the problem, I said, why don't we start to fix it by creating people who will be top performers in the tech industry? So we reach out to students, basically doing awareness that there are other jobs in the tech field besides coding, besides engineering. Myself, I personally, I have an expertise in user experience research, and that's a career that's very valuable in the tech industry, but it's not socialized as much. So we're really trying to put out there these other careers that you can have in the tech industry that aren't really high profile or aren't talked about as much.
What's the response among students?
It's been overwhelmingly great. A lot of students, they come in, they don't even know what user experience is. They don't know about other careers in the tech industry. We have a great retention rate. Students are also referring. Right now, I probably have more people interested than I have the resources to take on, which is a great problem to have. But they're enjoying the work. The students, the best thing that they tell me is that they feel really comfortable in the environment that I'm creating for them. Another big thing about Onyx Valley is creating meaningful interactions with employers. A lot of employers, you hear about these full-day interviews where you talk to, like 15 people. They may give you one bathroom break and a cup of water. But with Onyx Valley, what we're doing is we have the students working on these projects, and we invite employers to our environment. So they come, they watch the students work, and they can look at someone and go, oh, wow, I like the way Priscilla was thinking. Let me talk to her a little bit more later, rather than an environment where I'm thinking about cultural biases. A lot of my students talk about that. I don't know what they think about me, my background. But this is just a safe space, and they're doing great work, and people get to see the great work they're doing.
And I want to get back to that because the recruiting component of this is really important. Yes. Ronnie, your company, The Opportunity Hub, focuses on creating inclusive innovation. Can you speak to that and what exactly you mean by that?
Sure. Just to give you some context, I started my career as a technology founder, built and sold 2 companies. And just the traditional route or evolution is that eventually you start investing money. And so I helped to start a venture fund that's invested in over 30 companies, raised follow-on capital of about $300 million, created 1,000 jobs, and does about $75 million in ARR. So I'm like, kudos, we knocked it out of the park. And then I saw a study that suggested that income innovation density is a huge contributor towards income segregation. So here I am, this highly successful, exited black founder, published 4 books, senior fellow at Brookings, blah, 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 thinking I was doing good work, and then I found myself as a part of the problem. And so we launched Opportunity Hub to disrupt that income inequality or that racial wealth gap. So when we look at inclusive innovation, one, we have a definitive focus on racial equity because the word inclusive has become such a hashtag and such a cliche and such a buzzword that we lose some of the authenticity or the targeted opportunities to actually create change economically in our country. So we are definitively focused on racial equity with a focus on African American communities because we have the greatest outreach and reach there. When you pair that up with innovation, and for us, innovation is solving the hardest problems, utilizing technology with inclusive teams. And so when you're actually solving that problem, and in the entrepreneurial context, solving that problem also means you got to get paid for it. So there's actually a business model that's associated with that. And when you pair the two together, you can spark not just solving our toughest problems on the planet, whether that be in industry or society, but new net job creation and venture creation that actually creates multi-generational wealth with no reliance on pre-existing multi-generational wealth.
So I want to dig a little deeper into that. So innovation here appears to be bridging the gap. So who is being paired with whom? Is it companies that you're working with that are working with students or with different communities to find those people that are going to solve the problems of tomorrow?
There's some complexity to the stack. We're working with about 3,000 college students of color around the country, mostly at historically black colleges and universities. We provide them with high technical skills to match them with high growth technology companies like the MailChimps and the Ubers and the Googles of the world to actually work in paid summer internship roles that can lead to full-time employment. The second thing is, as companies deploy capital into their corporate innovation arms, what we're seeing is a lack of diversity in those spaces. And so then pairing those corporate innovation initiatives with high growth technology startups that are founded by people of color in their respective communities that are solving problems in those supply chains. And then the third thing is matching capital, whether we use some of our own capital to kind of spark a venture, but then being able to connect these early stage startups to the high growth venture funds that are looking or say they're looking for more diverse founders. We're positioning that. So it's kind of across those, across the career side, across the co-founder side, and across the capital side.
So much of this appears to start at the ground level, and it can be very small scale. It starts small and then gets bigger. Kai, with Penji, what have you learned about, what do you tell entrepreneurs when they're starting small? What are the next steps, and what does that future look like?
When we speak to mostly students, because we work with a lot of institutions in Camden, whether it's the Rutgers University, Rowan, Camden County, when we speak to young student entrepreneurs, we tell them that, well, first, I think it's better if I tell you our pipeline, how we bring the entrepreneurs in. We have a 6-month internship where we teach these entrepreneurs and these students, whether it's design, marketing, development, or content writing skills. And so they work with us for 6 months. Within the next 6 months, we teach them all sorts of entrepreneurial skills. And in addition, we allow them to learn, because we are entrepreneurs ourselves. Penji is a tech startup in Camden. So we submerge them into our startup ecosystem and into our company, so that way they get to really feel like what it's actually like. And they speak to myself, they speak to our co-founder. And what they really learn is that it's tough. It's extremely difficult to be an entrepreneur, especially if you are from an underserved community. And we try to teach them useful skills that allows them to be employed right afterward. And what we do encourage our students is that it's okay to be an entrepreneur, but don't follow everything you see on Instagram. Not every founder has to quit college. Not every founder has to drop everything and go and just go full time. So throughout the 6 months, we teach them a more realistic approach on how a lot of successful entrepreneurs actually make it in the real world. And that is, it's okay to just find a job. And the first thing you do is you work with a tech company. You work with other entrepreneurs. You work with a founder of a tech company who is someone like you. And you try to learn as much as you can from them. So essentially, that's what we try to teach them. We really show them like from A to Z.
Kyrie, you also work with students. Are you taking them off the Instagram path and kind of, guiding them through that entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, I think a lot of students, they see the big companies and they think, oh, wow, I want to work for them, and that's the dream. But I'm really encouraging entrepreneurship as well. In order for Onyx Valley to be successful, I believe we need to see students having projects that come out, and you see the next Uber, the next Facebook come out of there as well.
So all of this also pairs with outreach and talking to companies and creating those partnerships. So Ronnie, tell me a little bit about the partnerships that you've created with companies and getting them excited also to work with students coming out of historically black colleges and other communities.
Sure. I mean, to give a hat tip to social media and not completely throw them under the bus, we actually use the social media platforms as our primary go-to-market engine of reaching the students. And we've had actually, when you talk about disruption, so much more success in terms of connecting with the students on Snap and on IG and on Twitter, and then actually getting them to set up their profiles on LinkedIn. And so we've created a few different programs that we package and we take the companies to make it easy for them. I'm always looking at how do we solve problems and pain points inside an organization's supply chain. And university relations is a tough one, particularly because they're typically understaffed. They have to cover the entire country. They get complaints that they hire from the same universities, and so they're trying to outreach, and we're making that easier for them. So I'll take Facebook as an example. So we work with Facebook and Oculus, which is owned by Facebook. Their focus is on freshman students through a freshman university, which is powered by one of our partners, CodePath. And so basically, we go into our OHUB membership and identify freshmen, create a specific campaign for them so that they can recruit directly. And so we call it click and roots. We have the grassroots component using social media, and then we create these custom, contracts with companies to help them specifically target. We create a lot of custom content. One of the programs that we do is called HBCU at South by Southwest. And if you've never been to South by Southwest, it's the coolest thing you gotta go. It's 500,000 people over 2 weeks, but the interactive part is where the tech companies are and the VCs are and the large corporations that are interested in the startup world. And so we fly down, this past year we flew down 150 students from HBCUs and predominantly white institutions as well to Austin and paired them up for a weekend of activities with about 30 companies, from Comcast, to MailChimp, to GitHub. And what we're also doing, like you were saying, is pushing them towards those high growth companies, because if you can push them, I'll use GitHub as an example. So GitHub was recently acquired by Microsoft. We have a young lady that doesn't have a college degree, isn't technical, but just has some straight up dope non-technical skills, to be clear, all right? That's the word I borrowed. Not dope, but like cool dope, right? All right. I'm living vicariously through y'all. So, she's been working at GitHub for 3 years. Actually, she's from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. She's been working at GitHub for 3 years. When they were acquired, she has a little baby, and she says, you know what? Because of this acquisition and the equity and stock that I got at this company called GitHub, my child's college education, and if they want to get a master's degree, is paid for, and I don't have to work for 3 years, and I would still be able to live like I would my way of life. And the lesson in that is that even if you don't go start your high growth startup today, if you go work at a high growth startup and you get equity in that company, and as we move towards the fourth industrial revolution and the gig economy, we might as well be training our future workforce to be entrepreneurs anyway, because they'll be 1099. And so, but those are some samples of how we partner with companies, the programs we run, and why we do it.
And I'm about to turn to questions here in a second. But Kai, I want to get your thoughts on this too, because after that 6-month internship, what's the end goal? I mean, how do they move into the workforce?
So after the 6-month internship, we do one of two things. At our company, we hire content writers, marketers, designers, developers, if they're a good fit for us. Because one of the core questions that we ask when we employ somebody, and it's actually a very difficult question, is, especially for students, is, okay, what do you want? Like, what do you really want? What is your dream? What is your ambition? It's a very simple question. But then after that, we ask them, how can we help you get there? And a lot of students, now we admire those who can answer that question. And so if we are a good fit for the students, I'm sorry, the reason why we ask is we want to make sure that it's not always fair that you're a good fit for us just because you have the talent to help our company. It's also just as important that you can grow with us. We don't expect you to work with us for 20, 30 years. 5 years might be enough, maybe 10 years. And so if we determine that the student is a good fit for us and we are a good fit for them, then we hire them. If that is not the case and we're not a good fit, usually we're not a good fit for them. We seek out other companies that are. We seek out other companies that have the growth potential that they're looking for, and we try to get them employed, whether it's in Philly or in New York or in other cities.
Any questions? Well, this gives me more time for me. Kyrie, I want to get back to recruiting because there are studies that show that the recruiting process can inadvertently exclude minorities. And this is something that you've identified through your work. So can you talk a little bit about that and how you're working toward fixing that problem?
With recruiting, I think number one, as you were talking about earlier, companies have to realize they have to extend outside of their comfort zones. Like they go to the same schools over and over again. I'm actually a product of Howard University and HBCU. And there's someone over there with the Howard sweater. How you doing? And I remember there was a professor who came out. He was in an article in a magazine. He said he'd been asking for companies to come to Howard, come to our career fairs, come to our events, and they weren't coming out. Then fast forward to 2014, when these reports are released about diversity numbers, and now all of a sudden we have Google on Howard's campus, something that didn't happen before. So it's really obvious that they knew that there was an issue. They knew they didn't have the diversity, but they needed that extra push, and they needed to have someone really just call them out before they started to do something about it. And even now with Onyx Valley, I hear people who are very interested in the mission. They're very interested in the students, but when we start talking about actually recruiting them and bringing them on, you still get that thought of that reaction of, are they ready? Are they ready? And I see people who I know who look more like people that work at these companies, and they have just as much experience, or as little experience, rather, as my students, but they get looked at a little differently. So it's really about people being very comfortable about someone else who doesn't look like you. And I really challenge everyone to kind of think about that. One of my students was talking about interviewing for jobs. She's really nervous. And we had the conversation of, what does a nervous black girl look like versus a nervous white girl? If your interviewer is a white woman, she may identify a little bit more with you and say, oh, she's just nervous, it's an interview, it's a lot of pressure. But there's also the possibility, if I'm a nervous little black girl, then is she incompetent? Is she ready for this job? So I really encourage everyone to go out. If you do feel as though we all kind of have a little bit of bias, if you just go out and do a little more research, take the time to learn a bit more about other cultures, and just think a little bit more about your decisions.
I see you nodding in agreement. Ronnie, you've had a lot of experience with this. What is it? What is the takeaway here moving forward? And how do startups and entrepreneurs, how can that really present itself as an opportunity to bridge these diversity gaps?
Absolutely. One, I think, is scale. And so, we've partnered with, she's an HBCU grad, Janice Brown Howroyd, first black woman to build and run a billion-dollar company, and happens to be a staffing company. So one of the ways we're scaling it is saying everyone that joins OHUB, whether you are a college student, you've graduated, you've gone through one of our coding boot camps, you are assigned a personal recruiter, someone that's actually advocating on your behalf to help you get placed. And so I think as we started thinking about how do we scale, we've got to look at these models of using technology and infrastructure that exist. But also, as we move towards the gig economy, it's important for students and stakeholders and decision makers like the ones in this room to understand how the fourth industrial revolution is going to impact the future of work and why entrepreneurship is incredibly important. And I know a lot of times we hear, like, if you can't get a job, create a job. But to create that job, you need early stage capital. And a lot of times, early stage capital that's created for communities of color or low income communities, I stop saying underserved, I say underestimated, undersponsored, under-tapped communities, is you can't service debt when you can't service a loan. And so we need different types of products for entrepreneurial ventures, which I think the equity stack and philanthropy, whether it's PRIs or opportunity zone funds where capital can flow in to invest in these companies. One thing I know about the American construct is proximity is comfortable and is given a pass. And so if you're a white person and you're proximate to another white person, that density creates a relationship. Well, the same thing holds true if you're a Latinx person or if you're a Hispanic person, and sometimes intersectionality if you're black and gay or black and female. Proximity attracts. So if I'm a black founder like Jewel Burks, who's the only black woman who went to Howard University to ever sell a tech company to Amazon, or if I'm Rodney Williams with Listener, who went to Howard University and has raised over $15 million for his high growth, something about Howard, right? Startup. And there are cases like this at all the HBCUs, but my point is if we fund those high growth ventures, they will then hire and create those jobs that might fill the gap while we wait for other folks to get over their biases. And the reality of it is, if we have to wait for folks to get over their biases and have their own self-care, we'll be waiting forever. And so we have to create opportunities right now, and I think this room can help fuel that.
Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you all for joining me here today.
Thank you.